Every mechanic in the world knows the sound. A diesel engine idling into the car park on a Wednesday morning, a side door sliding open, chrome catching the fluorescent light from inside the bay, the Snap-on truck. For more than 100 years, one tool brand has held a position in the trades that no competitor has been able to touch. Not Mac, not Matco, not Cornwell. Snap-on. The name stamped into every ratchet, every socket, every wrench that a serious mechanic reaches for when the job has to be done right. The tools cost more than anything else on the market, sometimes 2 or 3 times more, and mechanics buy them anyway. They buy them off the back of a van, from a man who knows their name, who shows up every single week, who hands them the tool and says, "Try it." No retailer, no warehouse, no website, just a van, a route, and a handshake. That model, a franchise dealer driving a truck full of chrome into every garage and body shop and dealership service bay in the country, was so strange that business schools said it could not scale. It scaled to nearly $5 billion. This is the fascinating story of Snap-on, the van franchise that conquered the trades. It starts in Milwaukee. It starts, like most of the best tool stories do, with a man who got tired of watching other people waste time. In 1920, a mechanical engineer named Joseph Johnson is working at the Black Hawk Manufacturing Company in Milwaukee, a subsidiary of American Grinder. Johnson manages the factory floor. He knows metal, he knows fasteners. And every day, he watches mechanics reach into overstuffed toolboxes and pull out the same redundant wrenches. And he thinks the same thing. The math does not work. At the time, a socket wrench is a single piece of steel, one handle fused permanently to one socket. If you need 12 sizes, you carry 12 wrenches. If you need both shallow and deep reach, you double that number. A working mechanic's kit is heavy, expensive, and absurdly redundant because every single tool duplicates the same handle attached to a slightly different head. Johnson has an idea. What if you separate the socket from the handle? What if you design a square drive that lets different sockets snap onto different handles, interchangeably? 5 handles, 10 sockets, doing the work of 50 fixed wrenches. He pitches it to his boss at American Grinder. His boss turns it down. Johnson quits. He partners with a colleague named William Seidemann. The two of them incorporate a company on April 21, 1920, at 134 Reed Street in Milwaukee, with $25,000 in capital stock. They call it the Snap-on Wrench Company. The name comes from the mechanism itself, the satisfying click of a socket locking onto a square drive. They have no factory, they have no employees, they have no distribution. What they have is 2 sample sets, built by hand on weekends using crude bending jigs and whatever scrap steel they can get their hands on. They photograph the sets, they print brochures showing a mechanic's hand holding a single ratchet handle with a fan of interchangeable sockets beside it. And before they even have a production line turning, they generate more than 500 cash-on-delivery orders from mechanics who see the idea and immediately understand what it eliminates. 5 do the work of 50. That is the slogan. It is also the literal math. 5 interchangeable handles, 10 sockets of different sizes, doing the job of 50 separate fixed wrenches. The weight savings alone are transformative. The cost savings are even bigger. A mechanic who had been spending a small fortune assembling a full set of one-piece wrenches can now cover every fastener size he encounters with a kit that fits in one hand. But here is the part of the story that separates Snap-on from every other tool company that has ever existed. The product was clever. The selling was revolutionary. A man named Stanton Palmer joins the company almost immediately after its founding. Palmer is a born salesman, but he is not the kind who sits behind a counter. He takes the tools directly to the mechanic. He walks into the shop, lays the set on the workbench, and lets the mechanic hold them. Feel the weight, try them on a bolt. That moment, the moment a mechanic wraps his hand around a Snap-on ratchet for the first time and feels the action, becomes the foundation of a 100-year sales strategy. Not advertising, not catalog pages, the hand. Palmer becomes president of the company in 1921. He brings in a man named Newton Tarbell. And Tarbell does something that defines the next century of the business. He builds routes, assigned territories, regular weekly visits to the same shops, the same garages, the same mechanics. Not once a month, not when the mechanic calls, every single week. By 1925, Snap-on has 17 branches and 165 salesmen covering routes across the country. Not one of them sells through a store. Every sale happens at the mechanic's workplace. Every relationship is face-to-face. Think about that for a moment. 5 years after incorporating, with $25,000 in a rented room in Milwaukee, this company has built a national direct sales force that bypasses every retailer in America. No middleman, no display case, no negotiation with department store buyers. Just the man, the tools, and the trust. Palmer dies in 1931. The company turns to a creditor, the Forged Steel Products Company, whose owner, William Myers, becomes president. When Myers dies in 1939, Johnson himself takes over both companies. The headquarters move to Kenosha, Wisconsin. The company goes public in 1941. And through all of the leadership changes, through depression and uncertainty, the model never wavers. The route, the truck, the relationship. And then, in the same year Palmer dies, Snap-on does something no other tool company has done before. It introduces a time payment plan, credit, extended directly to the mechanic. This is enormous. A young mechanic in 1931 has no money. He has no credit history. He is 20 years old, earning apprentice wages, and the tools he needs to do his job properly cost more than he earns in a month. No bank will lend to him. No retailer will carry his name, but the Snap-on man will. The Snap-on man shows up every week, puts the ratchet set in his hands, and says, "Pay me a little bit each week. I will be back next Wednesday." That credit system turns Snap-on from a tool company into something closer to a financial institution dressed in chrome. It locks mechanics into the brand at the earliest point in their careers. It builds loyalty that competitors cannot crack, because the mechanic does not just use the tools, he owes on them. And the man he owes shows up at his bay every 7 days, carrying new inventory. Through the Second World War, Snap-on becomes a preferred supplier to the United States military, producing the hand tools that keep aircraft and armored vehicles operational in every theater. The company introduces its Safety First socket lock, a patented mechanism that prevents heavy sockets from falling off the drive during overhead work, the kind of problem that does not sound serious until a 3-pound socket drops from the underside of a bomber onto a mechanic's skull. Civilian tool shortages hit the home market hard during the war years. Other companies lose their dealer networks entirely. Snap-on does the opposite. It releases whatever available stock it has to its sales force and tells them to keep showing up. Keep the routes alive. Keep the relationships warm. Even if you have nothing to sell this week, show your face. That decision, born out of wartime necessity, becomes one of the most important strategic moves in the company's history. When the war ends and production resumes, Snap-on's competitors have to rebuild their networks from scratch. Snap-on's network never broke. After the war, Snap-on converts its entire sales force into independent business people with assigned territories. Each man owns his own inventory. Each man runs his own route. Each man is, in effect, a small business owner whose entire livelihood depends on Snap-on products. The formal franchise program does not arrive until 1991 under a new chief executive named Robert Cornog, but the architecture is already in place by 1945. And then the growth becomes extraordinary. Between 1969 and 1979, Snap-on's annual sales climb from $66 million to $373 million. Profits rise from $6 million to more than $42 million. The worldwide sales force passes 3,000. Subsidiaries open in Canada, then Mexico, then the United Kingdom in 1965. By the early 1980s, Snap-on is posting $430 million in annual sales, with net earnings above $37 million, and the stock is trading on the New York Stock Exchange. Think about how many shop floors those vans were pulling into every single week across 3 decades. Think about how many apprentices bought their first ratchet off the back of that truck and were still buying from the same dealer 20 years later. Think about the ritual of it. Wednesday morning, the truck pulls in. The mechanics drift over between jobs, browse the shelves, pick up a new torque wrench, turn it over in their hands, check the price, shake their heads, and buy it anyway. The van was not a distribution channel. It was a weekly ritual embedded into the culture of every professional garage in the English-speaking world. And the relationship compounded. The product line expands through the 1960s and 70s into diagnostics equipment, wheel balancers, alignment systems, and shop lifts. And in 1965, Snap-on patents the design that becomes its most durable competitive advantage: flank drive. Before flank drive, a wrench or socket grips a fastener at its corners, the points of the hex. Under high torque, the corners round off, the bolt strips. The mechanic loses 20 minutes reaching for the extraction kit. Flank drive changes the contact point. Instead of gripping the corners, the wrench contacts the flat faces of the fastener, just off the corner. The force spreads across a wider surface. The fastener does not round. The bolt comes out clean. Every mechanic who has ever stripped a bolt head understands instantly why this matters. After 1965, every competitor in the industry scrambles to develop their own version. Surface drive, OptiTorque, different names for the same admission. Snap-on got there first. The Bluepoint sub-brand, which traces back to the 1920s as a label for tools Snap-on sourced but did not manufacture itself, becomes a strategic weapon in its own right. Named for the blue-tinged tips that appeared on punches and chisels after oil quenching and tempering, Bluepoint allows Snap-on to serve a lower price point without ever putting a discount sticker on the Snap-on name. The apprentice buys Bluepoint. The journeyman graduates to Snap-on. The brand architecture mirrors the career ladder. If you have seen our video on Hilti, you know there is one other company in the world that sells this way. Hilti uses salaried sales engineers instead of franchise dealers, and it serves the construction trades instead of the automotive bay, but the philosophy is identical. Go to the customer, demonstrate in person, build the relationship week after week, never sell through a retailer. Two companies on opposite sides of the Atlantic, in entirely different industries, arrived at the same conclusion. The best way to sell a professional tool is to put it in a professional's hand. By the mid-1990s, Snap-on is the undisputed king of the mechanic's toolbox. Nearly 5,000 vans on the road, brand loyalty that borders on tribal identity, pricing power that no competitor can touch. And then the company does something that nearly destroys everything it built. It walks away from the mechanic. In 1991, Robert Cornog becomes chairman and chief executive. He is the first outsider to hold the top job in Snap-on's history. Cornog looks at the van model and sees a ceiling. The garage bay is not big enough. He wants industrial contracts, commercial accounts, global diagnostics platforms, software revenue. He starts acquiring Sun Electric, Sioux Tools, John Bean, Consolidated Devices, Baco, the Swedish hand tool brand, automotive data companies, collision repair suppliers, a private label arrangement with Lowe's. He pushes hard into Asian markets, and he launches a company-wide enterprise computer system to modernize the entire operation. The computer system fails, not quietly, catastrophically. Orders are delayed, deliveries stall. Franchise dealers who depend on weekly inventory shipments to stock their vans cannot get product. The system that was supposed to streamline the company paralyzes it instead. In 1998, Snap-on posts a net loss of $4.8 million, the first net loss in the company's history. The stock, which had traded above $46, begins falling. Asian markets collapse. Restructuring charges accumulate under a program the company calls Project Simplify. By 2001, the stock hits $21, a decline of more than 50%. Earnings per share, which had peaked at $2.53, crater to 33 cents. The company that had built its entire identity on knowing the mechanic personally, on showing up every Wednesday with chrome in hand, had spent half a decade chasing industrial contracts and software deals and retail shelf space. It had diluted the brand with a Lowe's private label partnership. It had poured money into acquisitions that had nothing to do with the mechanic's bay. It had looked away from the only customer who had ever mattered, and the mechanic noticed. When your dealer cannot get the socket set you ordered because the company's new computer system lost the shipment, you notice. When the van shows up half-stocked because corporate is focused on diagnostic software contracts instead of wrench inventory, you notice. When the brand that built its reputation on never letting you down starts letting you down every other week, you do not forget that. Dale Elliott takes over as chief executive in 2001. He adds the chairmanship the following year. He tries to stabilize. In November of 2004, he resigns abruptly. The board turns to Jack Michaels. Michaels is a Snap-on director and the former chairman and chief executive of HNI Corporation, where he had tripled revenues over 14 years building office furniture. He takes the combined role of chairman, president, and chief executive in November 2004, and he starts stripping. He cuts the diversification. He installs a system called Snap-on Value Creation Processes, built on lean manufacturing principles he calls rapid continuous improvement. He consolidates factories in Europe and the United States. He narrows the company's focus back to 4 priorities: customer service, brand strength, supply chain discipline, reduced complexity. It takes about 3 years. By 2005, net earnings recover to $92 million. By 2007, operating margins are climbing steadily. The van network stabilizes. The product pipeline refocuses on what the mechanic actually needs in his hands at the end of the week. The franchise dealers start trusting the company again. The mechanic starts trusting the truck. The lesson is brutal in its simplicity. Snap-on nearly destroyed itself by trying to be something other than what it was. The recovery required nothing more radical than going back to what had worked for 80 years. The van, the route, the mechanic, the handshake. In April of 2007, Nicholas Pinchuk becomes president and chief operating officer. By December, he is chief executive. He takes the chairmanship in 2009. Pinchuk is a Vietnam veteran, a Rensselaer-trained engineer, a Harvard MBA. He had run global divisions at United Technologies before joining Snap-on in 2002. Under his leadership, the company enters its longest sustained run of growth in the modern era, pushing through record revenues and margins year after year. But here is where honesty requires saying something uncomfortable, because this story is not clean. The same credit system that made Snap-on accessible to a 20-year-old apprentice in 1931 has become, for many mechanics today, a weight they cannot put down. Interest rates that critics describe as punishing, balances that never shrink because new purchases stack onto old ones week after week. A young technician who starts buying off the truck in his first year can find himself paying $50 a week, every single week, for years. The tool truck becomes the most expensive standing obligation in his financial life. He never quite pays it off because there is always one more ratchet, one more socket set, one more diagnostic scanner, and the Snap-on dealer is standing right there in the bay every Wednesday with the next thing he needs. And the franchise dealers themselves have not always been treated gently. Beginning in the late 1980s, former and current dealers file lawsuits alleging misrepresentation and contract violations. Snap-on pays out nearly $8 million, then $16 million, then another $16 million in litigation costs across 1989, 1990, and 1991. A class action settlement follows in 2006. Franchise disclosure documents over the years list dozens of individual dealer lawsuits. The company that built everything on the personal relationship has also built a system where the asymmetry inside that relationship generates enormous profit. The mechanic needs the tools. The dealer needs the route. Snap-on sits at the center of both dependencies. That tension is real. It does not erase what the company built, but it lives inside the same story. Today, Snap-on reports annual sales of $4.7 billion. It employs roughly 13,000 people. It manufactures in Kenosha, Milwaukee, Elizabethton in Tennessee, Elkmont in Alabama, Conway in Arkansas, Murphy in North Carolina, and more than a dozen other plants across the country. It operates in over 130 countries. Its stock reached an all-time high above $400 a share in April of 2026. The competitors are still out there. Mac Tools, owned by Stanley Black & Decker. Matco, owned by Fortive. Cornwell, the smallest and the last one still independently held. All of them run vans. All of them drive routes. None of them have matched Snap-on's pricing power. Mechanics will tell you the quality gap has narrowed over the years. Many of the tools come off similar machinery, but the Snap-on truck shows up every single week without fail, and the competitor trucks do not always do the same. That consistency, that presence, that reliability of the route itself is the moat, not the metallurgy, the Wednesday visit. And the van is still rolling. Approximately 4,700 franchise routes operate worldwide. Every week, those vans pull into the same bays, the same workshops, the same dealership service departments they have been visiting for decades. The dealer slides the door open. The chrome catches the light. A mechanic wipes his hands on a rag and walks over. Somewhere tonight, in a garage in Birmingham or Brisbane or Baltimore, a mechanic is reaching for a Snap-on ratchet. The chrome is worn smooth but unbroken. The drive clicks with the same precision it had the day he bought it off the back of the truck. There are initials scratched into the handle, maybe his father's. Maybe the name of a man who left the trade years ago and passed the tools down because he knew they still had work left in them. That ratchet does not care who runs the company. It does not care what the stock price closed at. It does not know about the enterprise software failure of 1998, or the franchise lawsuits, or the credit terms printed in the fine print. It works. It has always worked. It will probably outlast the van, the dealer, and the mechanic holding it tonight. That is the story of Snap-on. Not the tools. The tools were always excellent. The story is the truck. The story is the decision, made over a century ago in a rented room in Milwaukee, that the best way to sell a wrench is to put it in a working man's hand and let him feel it. Every business school said that model could not scale. Every competitor tried to copy it and fell short. Every Wall Street analyst who told the company to walk away from it nearly killed the company in the process. The van is still rolling. The mechanic is still buying. And after 100 years, the handshake still matters more than the algorithm. If you have ever bought a tool off the back of that truck, or if you are still paying one off, tell us your Snap-on story in the comments. The company history does not contain your name, but you are the reason the van keeps showing up.